An alien assassin was sent to kill him, but she fell for him instead. The wind howled through the darkened streets of New Chicago, carrying the distant hum of sky traffic overhead. Ethan Vale moved like a shadow, keeping his head down as he walked through the neon-lit alleyways. His trench coat was heavy with concealed weapons, small, discreet, but deadly. He had learned long ago that a man in his profession had to be ready for anything. Tonight felt different. There was a chill in the air, but not from the weather. Something was watching him. He could feel it. Years of working for the covert branch of Earth's intelligence division, better known as EON, had trained him to trust his instincts. And right now, his instincts were screaming. He turned a corner, moving toward a dimly lit section of the city, away from the bustling main roads. The only sound was the rhythmic clicking of his boots against the pavement. Then, in the blink of an eye, everything changed. A blur of motion shot toward him from above, moving impossibly fast. Ethan's reflexes kicked in, and he threw himself to the ground just in time to avoid a blade slicing through the air where his neck had been. An assassin. He rolled, drawing his sidum, but before he could fire, a foot slammed into his wrist, knocking the weapon away. Pain shot up his arm, but he gritted his teeth, moving quickly. He swung his leg out in a sweeping kick, hoping to trip his attacker, but the figure leapt over him with unnatural grace, landing soundlessly on their feet. Ethan pushed himself up, heart pounding as he got his first proper look at his would-be killer. She stood just a few feet away, clad in a sleek, dark combat suit that hugged her athletic frame. Her movements were fluid, effortless, like a predator playing with its prey. The street light caught the metallic gleam of her curved daggers, still wet from someone else's blood. But it wasn't her weapons that had Ethan on edge. It was her eyes. Silver, sharp, alien. She wasn't human. Ethan's grip tightened. He had dealt with extraterrestrials before, but this one was different. Her gaze was calculating, yet there was something else in it. Something almost curious. "You're better than I expected," she said, her voice carrying the slightest accent, unfamiliar yet melodic. "Most humans don't last 5 seconds. Ethan exhaled sharply, flexing his fingers. His wrist ached, but it wasn't broken. "Guess I'm not most humans," he said, her lips curved into the faintest smirk. "No, you're not." Then, she attacked again. Ethan barely dodged in time as her dagger sliced through the air, missing his throat by inches. He countered with a quick strike, but she was already gone, moving too fast for a normal human to track. "Damn, she's fast." He spun, trying to predict her next move, but she was already behind him. He felt the cold press of metal against his neck. She had him. A normal assassin would have ended it then and there. One swift cut, and it would be over, but she didn't. She hesitated. Ethan stayed completely still, breathing hard. "You're not going to do it," he said quietly. Her grip tightened, but she didn't press the blade further. "Oui?" he asked, his voice calm despite the situation. "You had me. Why didn't you finish it?" Silence. For the first time since the fight started, she looked unsure. That was all the opening he needed. With explosive speed, Ethan twisted, grabbing her wrist and yanking her forward. She gasped in surprise, but he was already moving, slamming her against the nearby wall and pinning her arms. For the first time, she was the one caught off guard. They were close now, breathing hard, locked in a silent standoff. Her silver eyes flickered with something unreadable as she gazed up at him. Ethan wasn't sure what he had expected from his attacker. Cold detachment, merciless efficiency, but not this. Not conflict. She looked at him like she was struggling with something. His grip on her wrists loosened. Just slightly, she noticed. In a blur of motion, she reversed their positions, slamming him against the wall instead. Ethan grunted as the impact knocked the air from his lungs. Damn, she was strong, and yet she still wasn't finishing it. Something was stopping her. He looked into her eyes again, and this time he saw it. Doubt? Regret. A silent war raging inside her. "You don't want to do this," he said softly. She stiffened. "I know what an assassin looks like when they believe in their mission," he continued. "You don't believe in this. You're hesitating." Her jaw tensed. "You don't know anything about me, human," she said coldly. Ethan smirked despite himself. "I know enough." A pause. Her grip on him tightened. as if trying to force herself to finish the job, but something inside her was breaking. Finally, she exhaled sharply, as if exhausted by her own indecision. Then, she stepped back. Ethan didn't move. He didn't try to run or fight. He just watched her. "This wasn't supposed to happen," she muttered, more to herself than to him. Ethan raised an eyebrow. What, failing the mission? She shook her head, silver eyes troubled. "No." She hesitated. "Meeting you?" Ethan blinked. That was not what he expected. Before he could respond, she turned sharply, and then she disappeared into the night. Ethan exhaled, his heart still hammering as he leaned back against the wall, staring at the empty street where she had vanished. What the hell just happened? Who was she? And more importantly, why had she spared him? One thing was certain. This wasn't over. Ethan sat in his dimly lit apartment, the rhythmic hum of the city beyond his window filling the silence. His fingers drummed absently against the surface of his desk, his mind replaying the encounter over and over again. The assassin should have killed him. She had every opportunity, and yet she hadn't. That hesitation meant something. His instinct screamed that this wasn't just another hit job. Someone had sent her after him, whoever she was. She wasn't just a cold-blooded killer. She was conflicted. Ethan pulled up his terminal and began running scans through Eon's classified database. He was still a ghost to the system, a former operative who had disappeared into civilian life after a final mission that had left him questioning everything. He hadn't planned on getting involved in any of this again, and yet here he was, digging. The terminal flickered, displaying pages upon page of records on known alien mercenaries, assassins, bounty hunters. The galaxy was filled with them, but none matched her exact description. No name, no record, nothing. That was troubling. Ethan leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temple. If she was a complete ghost, that meant she was either incredibly good at covering her tracks, or she belonged to an organization that didn't operate in normal mercenary circles. Something bigger. A sharp knock at his door pulled him from his thoughts. His hand instinctively moved toward the gun resting beside his desk, but he hesitated. The knock came again, this time softer. Ethan stood, gripping the weapon but not raising it. He moved toward the door and checked the small surveillance feed from the external camera. His pulse spiked. She was standing there, the assassin, dressed in dark civilian clothes this time, no armor, no weapons visible. She was alone, her posture rigid, as if she hated being here. Ethan exhaled slowly. This was insane. He shouldn't open the door. And yet, something in his gut told him that whatever this was, he needed to hear it. He unlocked the door and opened it just enough to look at her, keeping his body half, blocking the entrance. She stared at him, silver eyes unreadable. "We need to talk," she said, her voice quieter this time. Ethan studied her. No immediate hostility, no sign of an ambush. Still, he didn't move. "Talk, you tried to kill me last night." She exhaled, as if annoyed with herself. "If I wanted you dead, you'd already be dead." He raised an eyebrow. "Yeah, I got that much." A tense silence stretched between them. She shifted slightly, glancing over her shoulder before turning back to him. "They'll send someone else if I don't finish the job. I need to know why you were marked." Ethan narrowed his eyes. "You're the assassin. Shouldn't you know?" She frowned, frustration flickering across her face. "I don't ask questions. I follow orders." Ethan snorted. "Yeah, and yet here you are, not following orders." Something dark flashed across her gaze. She looked away briefly before speaking again. "I need answers," she said, her tone lower, more serious. "And you're the only one who can give them to me." Ethan watched her for a long moment, then sighed and stepped back, opening the door fully. "Fine," he said. "Come in." But she hesitated only briefly before slipping inside. Ethan shut the door behind her, resisting the instinct to keep his gun drawn. If she wanted to kill him, she wouldn't have knocked. She moved cautiously through his apartment, eyes scanning her surroundings, assessing everything, a trained killer's habit. Ethan leaned against the wall, arms crossed. "So wanna start with a name?" She hesitated. Then, "Finally Soren." Ethan nodded slowly. "All right. Now tell me, who sent you?" Her jaw tightened. "The Dominion." Ethan's stomach sank. The Dominion. They were no ordinary group. They were a powerful, secretive force that operated in the shadows, influencing governments, corporations, and military actions across multiple systems. If they wanted him dead, this was bigger than he thought. "What?" he asked, keeping his voice calm. Soren folded her arms, still guarded. "That's what I want to know." Ethan let out a breath. "So, let me get this straight. You were sent to kill me, and now you want my help figuring out why." She tensed. "Yes." Ethan ran a hand down his face, half laughing at the absurdity of this situation. Then he met her gaze again. "All right, but if we're doing this, you need to be straight with me." Soren's silver eyes locked onto his, unreadable but intense. "Deal," she said. And just like that, Ethan found himself working with the assassin who had been sent to end his life. This was going to get complicated. The tension in the room was palpable. Ethan watched Soren as she paced near the window, her silver eyes flicking toward the streets below, scanning for threats. She was restless, uncomfortable. He could see it in the way her fingers flexed, how she shifted her weight constantly. She didn't trust this situation. Didn't trust him, and he didn't blame her. "All right," he said finally, rubbing the back of his neck as he sat on the edge of his desk. "So, let me get this straight. You were hired to kill me, and now you want my help figuring out why." She turned, her arms crossed tightly. "I already told you. I don't ask questions when I take a contract. But something about this one didn't add up." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "Like the fact that you hesitated." Soren's expression flickered, just for a second, but it was enough. He had hit a nerve. Her posture stiffened. "I don't hesitate." Ethan smirked. "Then, what do you call last night?" She glared, but didn't answer. That was interesting. Ethan let the silence hang for a moment before standing and walking over to his terminal. He brought up the encrypted files he had been scanning earlier, scrolling through classified intelligence reports. "I don't exist on Dominion records," she said suddenly, her voice sharper now. Ethan glanced at her. "And yet, here you are. I mean, officially," she clarified. "No name, no registry, no ties to any known syndicate or mercenary group. The only people who know I exist are the ones who hire me." Ethan leaned forward, resting his hands on the table. "Which means whoever put the contract out wanted to make damn sure there were no trails leading back to them." Soren nodded slowly. That made things more complicated. Assassinations happened all the time. Governments, corporations, crime syndicates. They all played in the shadows, moving pieces on a board that most civilians never even knew existed. But if someone that high up wanted Ethan dead, and they were willing to hire an untraceable assassin like Soren, it meant he had something they feared. And that was dangerous. Ethan tapped the terminal, searching through Dominion activity in the past few months. If they had marked him, there had to be a reason. "What's your connection to them?" he asked. Soren didn't answer immediately. Her fingers tensed, as if she were weighing her words. "I was raised by them," she said finally. "Trained since I was a child." Ethan frowned. "So, you're not just an assassin, you're one of theirs." "I was," she corrected. "Not anymore." That was the first real thing she had admitted about herself. Ethan studied her carefully. There was something in her voice, something heavy. Regret, guilt, it was hard to tell. But it was there. He leaned back. "So, what changed?" Soren's silver eyes darkened. She exhaled through her nose and looked away. "I did." That was all she said. Ethan let that sit for a moment. He could press her, push for more. But something told him that was a conversation for later. Instead, he turned his attention back to the files, scanning for anything that could tell him why the hell the Dominion wanted him dead. And then, he found it. His stomach tightened as he read through the report. "They're covering something up," Ethan muttered. Soren stepped closer. "What do you mean?" He turned the screen so she could see. "Look, a classified Dominion operation. High clearance, deep cover intel gathering. The files are fragmented, but from what I can piece together, they were after something. Some kind of research." Soren's brows furrowed as she read over the lines of encrypted text. "This isn't just intelligence gathering. This is..." She trailed off, her lips pressing into a thin line. "What?" Ethan asked. She exhaled. "This looks like biological experimentation." Ethan's chest tightened. "Great," he muttered. So, not only does the Dominion want me dead, but they're also running illegal bio-experiments. Soren's expression remained unreadable, but there was something in her eyes. Something she wasn't saying. Ethan noticed. "You know more than you're letting on," he said, his voice even. She met his gaze but didn't respond. Ethan stood, closing the distance between them. Soren. She tensed slightly, her hands at her sides, but she didn't step back. She was wrestling with something. And then, finally, "This might be about me," she admitted. Ethan's breath hitched. She looked away, as if she hated the words coming out of her mouth. "I told you I was trained by the Dominion. But what I didn't tell you is that I wasn't just a recruit." Ethan's pulse quickened. "What were you?" Soren hesitated, then lifted her hand. Her fingers trembled slightly, and for the first time Ethan saw it. A faint glow beneath her skin. His stomach dropped. "They did something to you," he realized. Soren clenched her jaw. "I was part of one of their programs. They called it Project Eclipse. They took children, orphans, abandoned, stolen, and they made us into something else." Ethan's mind raced. He had heard rumors of the Dominion experimenting on soldiers, but nothing had ever been confirmed. Now, he was looking at the proof. Soren's hands curled into fists. "I escaped years ago. I thought I was free." She let out a bitter laugh. "But if they're still running experiments, if they're tying you to this..." She didn't finish. Because the answer was obvious. If the Dominion wanted Ethan dead, it wasn't because of who he was. It was because of what he had stumbled onto, and worse, because of her. Ethan took a slow breath. "So, let me get this straight. You were part of a secret bio-enhancement program. The Dominion covered it up, and now, someone wants me dead because I somehow got too close." Soren's silver eyes met his. "Yes," Ethan exhaled sharply. "Well, that's just fantastic." A heavy silence stretched between them. Soren shifted, her shoulders tense. "You should walk away from this," she said quietly. Ethan stared at her. "And let them keep doing whatever the hell this is." He shook his head. "No chance." Soren gritted her teeth. "This isn't your fight." Ethan smirked. "It is now." She sighed sharply, turning away, rubbing a hand over her face. "You're going to get yourself killed." Ethan's voice softened. "Yeah, so, are you?" Soren stilled. Neither of them spoke for a long moment, and then she laughed. A short, sharp, almost bitter laugh. Ethan raised an eyebrow. "What?" Soren shook her head, silver eyes flicking toward him with something almost amused. "You're an idiot." Ethan grinned. "I get that a lot." Soren exhaled, finally letting her shoulders relax, just slightly. "Fine," she said. "If we're doing this, we do it my way." Ethan nodded. "Deal." "Oh." And just like that, they became partners. Neither of them fully trusted each other, but they both knew one thing. If they wanted to survive, they had to stick together. The air inside Ethan's apartment was thick with tension. The silence between him and Soren stretched, heavy with the weight of their conversation. The Dominion, bio-experiments, Project Eclipse. All the pieces were starting to fit together, and the picture they painted was far worse than Ethan had anticipated. Soren leaned against the window frame, arms crossed, her silver eyes narrowed in thought. The neon glow of the city lights illuminated the faint shimmer beneath her skin, the unnatural glow of whatever enhancements the Dominion had forced upon her. Ethan ran a hand through his hair, exhaling. "So, you're telling me they engineered you, modified you?" Soren's jaw clenched. "I was an experiment before I was an assassin." She said it like it was just a fact, but Ethan could hear the anger buried underneath. "They took kids," she continued, voice quieter now. "Trained us, enhanced us. Some of us didn't survive." She hesitated before adding, "Most didn't." Ethan swallowed hard. He had heard rumors of Dominion experiments, secret projects designed to create the perfect soldiers, but nothing had ever been confirmed until now. He let the revelation settle before speaking again. "You said you escaped." Soren nodded. "A few of us did. We thought we were free. But they never stopped looking for you," Ethan guessed. Soren scoffed. "Of course not. The Dominion doesn't let assets walk away." She exhaled sharply. "I went dark, took contracts, became someone else. But the second I took this job, I knew something was wrong." Ethan frowned. "What tipped you off?" Soren shifted, uncomfortable. It wasn't just a kill order, it was an extraction. Ethan stilled. "They wanted me alive." She nodded. That sent a cold chill down his spine. Assassination orders were one thing. Quick, efficient, clean. But extraction? That meant they wanted him for something. His thoughts raced. What the hell did he have that they wanted? What did he know? He turned back to the terminal, scrolling through encrypted files. If he was on the Dominion's radar, there had to be a reason. His fingers paused over a file. Project Eclipse. Personal registry. Ethan clicked it open, and then his blood ran cold. His name was there. His name, listed under none. Enhanced subject, unsecured data source. What the hell? He muttered. Soren stepped forward, glancing at the screen. Her brows furrowed. "You're in their database." Ethan's pulse pounded in his ears. He wasn't part of the project, but he was listed in their records. He clicked on his name, opening the attached files. The text was partially corrupted, but he could make out key phrases. Data leak. Compromised security protocols. Non-enhanced anomaly. He frowned. "I don't remember ever being involved in this." Soren was silent, scanning the file with a tense expression. Then, after a moment, "Your DNA is flagged." Ethan blinked. "What?" She pointed at a corrupted string of code. "See this? It's an anomaly marker. They flagged you as genetically significant." Ethan stared. "What?" Soren's expression darkened. "They didn't just want to kill you, Ethan. They wanted to study you." His stomach twisted. This just got worse. Ethan had no idea why his DNA would be flagged, but if the Dominion wanted him alive, it meant he was valuable. And that was never a good thing when dealing with a corrupt, shadowy organization. He turned to Soren. "If they're after me, that means they know I'm onto them. We need to move." She nodded. "Agreed. We've already stayed here too long." Ethan grabbed his bag, stuffing essentials inside. Weapons, data drives, anything they could use. Soren checked her own gear, securing her weapons. "I know a safe house outside the city," she said. "We can lay low there." Ethan nodded, heading for the door. And then the power cut out. Total darkness. Soren's head snapped toward the window. Outside, black armored figures were descending from rooftops, their visors glowing red. Dominion operatives. They had found them. Soren moved instantly, yanking Ethan down just as the first round of gunfire shattered the window. Glass exploded into the room, embedding in the walls. Ethan rolled, grabbing his sidearm. "We need to get out of here. Now." Soren was already moving. She grabbed a small device from her belt and threw it toward the wall. A detonation pulse. The explosion blew open a section of the apartment, revealing the fire escape beyond. "Go!" she shouted. Ethan didn't hesitate. He bolted forward, leaping through the smoke and debris, landing on the metal platform. Soren was right behind him, her movements flawless, inhumanly precise. More gunfire erupted behind them as Dominion forces breached the apartment. "Jump!" Soren yelled. Ethan glanced down, 3 stories below. Soren didn't wait. She grabbed him and they leaped. The impact jarred Ethan's bones, but they rolled with the force, landing in a crouch. The second they hit the ground, Soren was already dragging him forward. "We need to disappear," she said. Ethan's mind raced. If the Dominion had tracked them this quickly, nowhere was safe. But if they wanted him alive, that meant they wouldn't stop, and that meant he had to stop them first. The night air was thick with smoke and the distant hum of sirens. Ethan's lungs burned as he ran alongside Soren, their bodies moving in perfect sync through the narrow alleys of the city. Every breath was laced with adrenaline, every step carrying the weight of the hunt behind them. They had barely made it out alive. The Dominion's operatives weren't just after them anymore. They were deploying tactical suppression squads. That meant one thing. The Dominion wanted them silenced. Soren skidded to a stop, pressing her back against the cold metal wall of a storage facility. Her silver eyes scanned the surroundings, her chest rising and falling with controlled breaths. "They're sweeping the whole district," she muttered. "We need to get out of the city." Ethan wiped the sweat from his brow. "We're. Every exit's probably locked down." Soren thought for a second, then reached into her belt and pulled out a small device. It was sleek black and pulsed with a faint blue light. "This is a Dominion override key," she said. "I stole it from their last base. It'll get us past any security checkpoint. But we have to move fast." Ethan nodded. They slipped through the shadows, moving low and fast. Every street corner, every rooftop felt exposed. The Dominion had eyes everywhere then. A low whirring sound filled the air. Ethan's stomach twisted. Drones. Soren yanked him behind an abandoned vehicle, just as a Dominion Recon drone swept over the area. Its red scanner pulsed, searching for signs of movement. Ethan could hear his own heartbeat pounding. If they were spotted, they were done. Soren held up 3 fingers, then 2. Then they moved. The moment the drone turned away, they sprinted for a side tunnel leading underground. As soon as they dropped into the tunnel, the sound of the city muffled. It was dark, damp, and smelled of rust, but it was safe. For now. Ethan exhaled, pressing his hands to his knees. We can't keep running like this. Soren nodded. I know. They stared at each other in the dim light, unspoken words hanging between them. They had been forced together, a killer and her target, an assassin and a former operative. But now they were something else. Soren looked away first, her jaw tightening. I never should have taken this contract. Ethan studied her. Why did you? She hesitated. Then the truth. Because I thought if I completed the job, the Dominion would finally leave me alone. Ethan's stomach twisted. He understood. She had been running, just like him. She sighed. But now I realized they were never going to let me go. A silence stretched between them. Then Ethan spoke. What do you want to do now? Soren exhaled. I want to burn the Dominion to the ground. Ethan smiled for the first time in hours. No, that's something I can get behind. She smirked, just slightly. Good, because we're going to need every advantage we can get. She reached into her belt and pulled out another device. This one larger, more complex. Ethan raised an eyebrow. What is that? Soren's silver eyes gleamed in the dim light. It's the key to breaking into one of their classified sites. If we want to end this, we need to know what they were planning for you. Ethan felt his pulse quicken. He had spent so long running, hiding. Now it was time to fight back. Soren smirked, tossing him a sidearm. You in? Ethan caught it with ease, his grip tightening around the weapon. Oh, I'm in. And just like that, the hunted became the hunters. Their war had just begun.